Hello and welcome to the WATG podcast. I am your host, Corey Jennerjohn, and I am very excited to bring with me today Ruth Robinson and Carol Wright, some two members of the of WATG that are going to give us a nice historical perspective of where WATG was and how it got here. Very nice pioneering podcast, if you will. So Ruth, can you tell me a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Quickly, I began teaching in 1973 with a 1.8 license from the UW-Madison. I taught in Australia for a year and a half, and I worked in various schools here in Wisconsin um, through the 70s, 80s, and 90s. I finished the master's degree in educational psychology with the emphasis on gifted in 1989, and I worked in Albany, Evansville, and Janesville as their gifted coordinator in between those years from 89 till I retired in 2011.
Okay.
I was president of the WATAG in 2003-4, and I was on the board most of 2000 to 2014.
Okay. All right. Thanks. Carol, tell me a little bit about yourself.
Yes, I started teaching in Baltimore County, Maryland, where I got my Master's of Arts in Teaching degree at the Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore. And my husband was getting his PhD at the time, so we moved to Purdue for his postdoc and then to Madison when he became a professor at the university. And I raised our family for about 13 years and then needed to renew my license. So I took 6 credits in gifted and talented, the psychology of gifted and talented education, or gifted and talented students at the university, and got my first full-time or part-time job in Waterloo in 1983 and moved to Monona Grove full-time in 1987. I became executive director, administrative director of the Future Problem Solving Program in the early 80s when I joined the WCGT board, Wisconsin Council for Gifted and Talented, and then became president in 1990 of WCGT, whereupon we did a statewide awareness program and then finally merged with the Wisconsin Educators for Talented and Gifted in the early 90s. And my brother was part of that movement as well. He was president of WAEGT at the same time I was president of WCGT. So it was a
Okay.
nice merger.
Okay. I guess first of all, this could be for either lady. How did Waytake come about?
Well, I have in front of me, Corey, the very first issue of the Wisconsin Council for Gifted and Talented News. And I'm going to read to you the account of the very first meeting of WCGT at the hands of Jane Nolte Arnold. And it says here that the council formed in June of 1974. The parents of gifted and talented children from across the state met in Madison on May 13th of 1974. The group was brought together by Dr. Fran Kimmy and Dr. William Ernst, co-chairman of the Professional Advisory Committee to the State Superintendent on the Gifted and Talented. The group formed a steering committee to organize a state-level parent organization or advocacy group. A second meeting was held on June 10th, and at that meeting, the name of the group was voted upon and goals and objectives were adopted. A statement of purposes and goals was subsequently prepared that reads in part, the Wisconsin Council for the Gifted and Talented is an organization of parents dedicated to improving the educational opportunities for gifted and talented children in the state of Wisconsin. Although the objectives of the council are primarily concerned with the education of the gifted and talented, we believe that all children have the right to fulfill their potential, whatsoever that potential might be. Goals of the council center around the development of programs for gifted and talented children, public awareness and understanding of the needs of gifted and talented, teacher preparation, parent education, legislation, etc. And the very first conference was held in Madison on September 21st of 1974, which is why we're celebrating our 50th anniversary of the organization this coming fall at our fall conference.
Wow, that's amazing. 1974. How far do you think Waytake has come since 1974?
Oh my, we've come miles and miles, with miles still to go, I'm afraid. When we're thinking back on this, I think the first big advantage for advancing and serving the needs of gifted and talented children and youth was the adoption of state statute Standard T in 1988, which required school districts to provide services for these children. That whole process had actually started with a state superintendent's study committee in 1971, and it took all those years to actually get the statute accomplished. And after the statute, within a couple of years, that provided us with a consultant at the Department of Public Instruction, which we had initially with Dr. Ellie Schatz, and she was followed by Welda Swed Simusek. And then somewhere in the 90s, that consultancy position was eliminated at the state level. So that became an issue for WATG board members to continue to lobby to keep that position. We went from there. In 2005, we organized a Wingspread Study Council over at the Wingspread Conference and Center and Retreat in Racine, which brought together educators, parents, students, business leaders, legislators to talk about the needs and services for families and their gifted children. From 2007 through 11, somewhere in there we got our consultant back, and there were DPI competitive grants, which WATG received substantial funding each of those school years. And during those years, we provided over 20 different modules of learning about gifted and talented students, what the teachers needed to know, what parents needed to know, what all kinds of things. We went to almost every CISA district. We were as far north as Tomahawk and down from La Crosse to Green Bay to Milwaukee and everywhere in between. Also in the 2000s, we had optional licensure initiated at the Department of Public Instruction, and initially they're optional. No district is required to hire licensed folks, but there are modules of learning for teachers interested in having background to be a gifted and talented program coordinator or a resource teacher at University of Wisconsin-Whitewater. This coming summer, Dr. Scott Peters is offering those modules, and people are still signing up to learn all about it. And to this day, coordinators, teachers, parents, administrators, business leaders continue to embed their services into school district Board of Education policy manuals. And none of that continues to happen or happens consistently without the full backing and support of the parents and families and communities of these children who insist that their kids deserve an appropriate and significant education as well.
Okay.
So
Are
there's a lot.
are both of you surprised that after this long we're still talking about inclusion and other things with gifted learning?
Well, I've said many times that I think that the cycle of gifted and talented education is a cycle that is about 20 years long, which is a generation. When I was going through school in the late 1950s, Sputnik went up. The money was pouring into the schools like there was nobody's business for math and science education. And then things kind of dipped down in the late 60s. I think the last year that the PSATs or the SATs and the ACTs were going up was 1967. So we kind of entered a valley, if you will, And that's why I think in the early 70s, people started to wonder what happened to all those honors classes that we had in the late 50s. And so the cycle started upwards again. And as Ruth explained a moment ago, reached its peak in 1988. And the programs that came into being at that time were just phenomenal in number and quality. And then I think by the time I retired in 2001, I think things were probably starting to dip down again. And I don't know where they are now, Ruth, whether it started going up again. But it's been a series of peaks and valleys, I think, on a 20-year cycle.
Okay. So it's not just a regular plateau where, gifted learning is a high priority. It kind of, and unfortunately, it probably kind of comes and goes with um, various political leanings. Is that a fair question too?
And also leadership. I think that the early years of WCGT, the people were so committed. We have a whole profile, or we have a whole series of profiles, what we call pioneer profiles, of all the people that played leading roles in the organizations in the beginning. So leadership and the desire to have these programs comes, I think, first from the people that need it, the children and the parents who need it, and the educators that need it. Then the administration follows suit if the advocacy is strong enough.
Was it do you think it was hard to was it a hard sell, to start up WATG in 1974? Was there a lot of people that really didn't understand what it was or what the mission was?
I think that's a perpetual question, Corey. It was hard at the start, and as I was reading through many of the papers from Bob and Donna Ray Clausen, who were to me, the grandmother and grandfather of gifted ed in Wisconsin, I took coursework from both of them and was lucky to call them friends long after the college days were finished. But it's always hard because it's always new to somebody. And someone that I served on the board with kept saying, the only way that we have progress is like if you picture the pinwheel that the kids will have out pretty soon now in the spring to spin in the wind, is the only way the pinwheel spins is through constant and persistent pressure. So it never quits. And that, I think, it's important to understand. It can be exhausting, but there needs to be persistent pressure on the pinwheel. And in our case, it's advocacy and understanding of the purpose of educating students at the highest level.
I think there are also joys along the way that counterbalance the challenge. We wouldn't be doing this if there were not some reward that would satisfy our soul, if you will, our spirits and our souls, to keep us going.
Yeah,
and that comes from the kids. The best thank you note I ever got from a graduating senior was what he enjoyed in the programs I worked with him on comedy, sports, and Odyssey of the Mind. Mm-hmm. And he said, "You taught me how to laugh, and you taught me how to think."
In fact, the guy that's tiling my kitchen right now, he was a product of the McFarland Gifted and Talented program, and remembers the coordinator that served him well in that school district. So even though he's doing a vocational job now, he certainly was bright enough to be part of the Gifted and Talented program in McFarland.
Those are really, really awesome stories. And it's just, I don't know, it really is amazing to me how, like I said, way back in 1974, there was a incredible leadership, incredible foresight to get something like this off the ground, get it going. And just to put the priorities of the kids first, because back then, how many states even thought about or even had a gifted association in their own state back then? I'm guessing it wasn't that many.
Corey, unfortunately, Wisconsin was last to have a statute on their books for gifted education. Wisconsin was not a leader nationally. We lagged behind somewhat.
But there is a reason for that too, Corey, in that the educational programs in the northern states were much stronger than the educational programs in the southern states. For example, Florida and Texas had all kinds of money pouring into gifted and talented programming because their normal educational programs were so weak. But Wisconsin and Iowa and some of the other northern states, we had such strong regular educational programs that the gifted and talented program was essentially embedded in the regular program to begin with. We just needed that little bit of extra push to get something on, on the legislative books in 1988.
Okay, so basically, like the skeleton or the framework was more or less there. Is that fair?
Well, the quality education, I think we still have good education. I
Oh,
mean,
yeah, for
just think of Wisconsin and Iowa finishing number one back to back in on the ACT scores. So our regular programming is very strong. But if you consider the fact that, especially when you consider the pyramid model that we've used in the state of Wisconsin, 60% of the kids, their needs can be met within the regular classroom. 30% need small group activity, and 10% need that one-on-one mentoring or whatever else personalized education that they need. That is added into the strong structure that we already have in the state of Wisconsin. Of course, Tony Evers was state superintendent of schools before he became governor, so we do have a governor who is very education minded.
That's a really good point that you make about how strong Wisconsin's current education model is, because I agree. I think it's amazing, and to finish that high in the ACT along with Iowa's is remarkable. But couldn't use that as a counter argument too? Couldn't I mean what if somebody were to say, "Hey, we don't need gifted education because our regular education model is so high"? What's the argument for something like that?
Because all kids are different. How about that?
Mm-hmm.
They, you know, they all come in at various levels every year, and it's never the same, and their needs are never exactly the same. And you the best teachers I've known, and I've known an awful lot of them, but the best teachers are those that can switch on a dime and recognize this kid needs, okay, something more than I've got prepared today. So let me talk to that, let me deal with that a little bit later. But that would be equivalent to saying, well, why do we need special ed? We don't need special ed then, because if the kids just work a little longer, the slower learner he'll get there eventually, right? Why do we need special programs for anybody? Because it's the same reason we don't give everybody glasses so they can read, because not everybody needs glasses. But so it's a matter of meeting the kids where they are. And there are all just thousands of comparisons as to why different programs are needed to be able to reach as many kids as possible.
The glasses analogy is pretty awesome. I like that. I've never heard that before, but I like it. um, Hypothetically, if WATG never came into existence, where would gifted learning be in the state of Wisconsin, do you think?
I think that depends upon the teachers. Some teachers know in their gut what these kids need, and they will provide that. They will serve those children very well. There are other teachers who are actually threatened by the fact that they might have a child in the classroom who is more able than the teacher is. I have a nephew who was talking about palindromes when he was in first grade, and the school district immediately accelerated him to second grade. I don't know that the teacher herself knew what a palindrome was, but that this is the point: is that there are some teachers that know in their own gut what a child needs because they've needed that themselves, and him or herself, and that's why some teachers serve gifted kids extremely well. And we all know who those children, the kids themselves know who those teachers are, and they flock to their classes. I think of a social studies teacher at Oregon High School who seemed to he wasn't the most organized person in the world, but talk about an appeal to the gifted kid. a gifted child, they were there in his classroom. Same thing with a lot of the extracurricular activities. If you wanted to know where the gifted kids were, they were doing academic decathlon, or they were doing mock trial after school as an extra added on to their regular coursework.
Okay, that's interesting. That's an interesting point that you made about teachers being afraid because they're afraid of the student being ahead of the teacher. Has Do you think that happens more than we know? I bet you there's a lot of examples like that.
Probably. And I think, as a classroom teacher, especially at the elementary level, you're in charge, literally, of everything, of how the day is programmed, what the lessons are going to be, what the activities are going to be. I mean, you're the general directing the troops, and if the troops see a shortcut, um, it's a personality trait. I think I had to learn it myself. I was not this way as a first year teacher. That you need to be able to accept that child who asks you in second grade that what he wants to learn about is the Kalahari Desert, even though I don't know where the Kalahari Desert is. And say, sure, okay, then let's just work on that.
In fact, Paul Torrance once talked about the salamander kids because he loved salamanders. And if the teachers were going to reach them, everything they did, whether it was math or science or literature or social studies, if they tied it into with salamanders, this kid was extremely happy.
That's interesting. Basically, there's got to be almost like dual learning from the student and the teacher's perspective. Is that fair?
Oh, sure. I've learned a lot from kids. Believe
Yes,
me.
yes. It's a mentorship back and forth between the child and the teacher. And I mean, all teachers do their best in the classroom. I mean, they have a yeoman's job to do, and so for us to ask them to do even more than they're doing every single day is asking a lot. But I think with the proper training and with examples, they can. And sometimes it's the gifted and talented specialist coming into the classroom, say, for example, with a haiku contest at the fourth grade level, that allows the teacher to program for children who might have that gift of creative writing.
Which is why school districts need to have somebody coordinating programs at the district level and some sort of support for the classroom teachers through the grades so that it can be a collaborative effort.
Okay.
Because
Exactly.
it is a big job.
And many administrators are very, very proactive. As we mentioned Tony Evers just a moment ago, but there are many legislators who have come to our conferences have also helped us advance the cause. So I think those of us who see perhaps the light at the end of the tunnel are the ones that come together. And it's been a joy to meet these people too. I know Ruth because of our work together, and it's just a real joy to know these people.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, this organization, ever since I became a board member, has just been a breath of fresh air. The way they advocate and educate for gifted learning is absolutely unbelievable, and it's second to none. And I'm really proud to be a part of this organization. Um, just finally, how you both of you can answer this question: how does gifted learning become more of a priority in this state?
Mm.
Well, I think that the continuation of the standard T, we still have that in our back pocket, so to speak. And although I've been retired now for a good 20 years, I'm assuming that that standard still provides some avenue for parents to advocate for their own children.
Okay.
Yes, because once something which is why I was advised many years ago to embed programming or programming options or services, whatever, into Board of Education policies, because like state statutes, they're a devil to get one,
Mm-hmm.
but once they're there, it's much harder. It's even harder to eliminate them. So that is key. And how to make it a more of a priority. I think the other strength of WATG is the strength of the board as it's continued year after year after year. You have some amazing personalities on the current board, I'm learning. Um, and there and It seems as though the wheel keeps turning, and the people who have this interest and knowledge and background and drive keep appearing, thankfully.
And
So
just think of the adventure that you're on that started so many years ago. And when I look at the website today and all that's available compared to what this, you can't see this first little newsletter here, but I'm sure it was done on the ditto machine or a
it
mimeograph.
was a mimeograph.
Everything is so much more sophisticated now. So the proof is in the pudding. I think the organization has grown and has changed and is much better for it.
Well, Ruth and Carol, I really thank you, and I really appreciate all your thoughts and how you're able to plant the gifted learning seed in the state of Wisconsin, and way taken just to kind of see that grow. It's just been absolutely remarkable. So thank you both for everything that you've done. It's been very, very well appreciated.
And thank you for your service too, Corey.
Yeah, thanks. This is quite an experience in itself.
Thanks a lot to you both.
Thank you.